My name is Evelyn Grace, and I'm 70 years old. I suppose that's how most stories like this begin with an age, a name, and the weight of years that have taught you things you never wanted to learn. I'm telling you this story not because I want your pity, but because sometimes the quiet ones have the most to say. And after a lifetime of listening, of watching, of keeping peace, well, sometimes you realize that your voice matters too. Let me take you back to where it all began. Not to the wedding that comes later, but to a Tuesday morning in early spring. When my world was still small and safe and predictable, I was sitting in my favorite chair by the kitchen window. The one with the faded blue cushions that Thomas had bought me for our 30th anniversary. The morning light was filtering through the lace curtains, casting soft shadows across the worn wooden table where my teacup sat steaming. Earl Grey, always Earl Grey. Thomas used to tease me about it. Evelyn, he'd say in that gentle way of his, you'd drink Earl Grey in the desert if they served it. And I would have. Some things bring comfort simply by being constant. The house was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds. Marking time. The way it had for 43 years. Tick-tock, a rhythm that had become the soundtrack of my solitude. Through the window, I watched Mrs. Henderson's tabby cat stalking something in the garden. Probably the robin that had been building a nest in the old oak tree. Circle of life, I thought, sipping my tea. This was my routine now. Had been for the 3 years since Thomas passed. Wake at 6, make tea, sit by the window, watch the world wake up around me. It wasn't a grand life, but it was mine. And after raising 3 children, helping to raise 2 grandchildren, and spending 47 years as the town's head librarian, I had earned the right to quiet mornings and simple pleasures. The phone rang sharp and sudden in the stillness. I startled, nearly dropping my cup. Who calls at 7:30 in the morning? My heart did that little flutter it does now whenever the phone rings unexpectedly. At my age, early calls rarely bring good news. "Hello," I said, my voice still rough with sleep, "Mom." "It's Sarah, my daughter. My middle child, the one who had inherited Thomas's practical nature and my stubborn streak." Sarah lived 2 hours away in the city with her husband and my grandson Luke. 25 years old now, Luke was. Where had the time gone? "Sarah, honey, is everything all right?" asked, settling back into my chair. "Oh yes, everything's fine. I was calling about Luke's wedding. Do you know it's coming up next month?" Of course, I knew. Luke had been with his girlfriend Emma for 3 years. I'd met her exactly twice, once at Christmas 2 years ago, and once at Luke's birthday party. Last summer, she seemed nice enough, though quiet around me. Maybe shy. I remembered being shy around Thomas's mother at first, too. "Yes, dear. I'm so excited for him. He's such a good boy. And Emma seems lovely." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It's one of those pauses that feels heavy, loaded with words that want to be said but haven't found their way out yet. "Mom, about the wedding. I wanted to talk to you about that." I waited. Sarah had always been the type to gather her thoughts before speaking. Even as a child, she'd pause and consider while her brothers would blurt out whatever came to mind. "Well, the thing is, it's going to be quite a todo. Emma's family is they're very formal, very traditional, and expensive. The venue alone is costing more than most people's cars. It's wonderful, dear. Luke deserves a beautiful day." Another pause, longer this time. "The thing is, Mom, I'm not sure. I mean, with your arthritis and everything, and the venue being so far out of town and the reception going so late, I just wonder if it might be too much for you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I'm just saying that maybe ... maybe it would be better if you didn't worry about coming. You know how these young people's parties can be. Loud music, dancing until all hours. It might not be your cup of tea." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could feel the teacup growing cold in my hands. Are you saying I'm not invited to my grandson's wedding? No, no, Mom, it's not that. It's just, maybe we could have a nice family dinner afterward. It's just the family. Wouldn't that be better? I had raised 3 children. I had helped raise Luke from the time he was 8 years old, when Sarah was going through her divorce and needed someone to watch him after school. I had been the one to teach him to tie his shoes, to read chapter books, to ride a bicycle. I had been the one to hold him when he cried about his father leaving, the one to attend every school play and baseball game when Sarah was working double shifts, and now I was being gently, politely, lovingly excluded from the most important day of his life. I see, I said quietly. Mom, please don't be upset. It's just ... It's complicated, you understand, don't you? I understood more than she knew. I understood that somewhere between the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap during story time and the young man who was getting married, I had become an inconvenience. An embarrassment, maybe? The old woman who didn't fit into their beautiful, expensive, formal world? Of course, dear. I understand. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Sarah. I hung up the phone and sat in my chair for a very long time watching the morning light move across the kitchen floor. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't move to make another cup. I just sat there feeling something inside me crack like ice on a winter pond. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of quiet hurt. I told myself I was being foolish, that Sarah was probably right. What did I have in common with young people and their parties? I was 70 years old, for heaven's sake. I probably would have been uncomfortable anyway, but the hurt lingered, settling into my bones like arthritis. A constant ache that colored everything gray. A week later, I decided to work in the garden. It was a warm spring day, and the daffodils were pushing up through the soil Thomas had tilled so carefully every year. I thought maybe getting my hands dirty would help, would remind me that life goes on, that there's beauty in simple things. I was deadheading the roses when I realized I needed more mulch. The garden center was only a few blocks away, and the walk would do me good. I put on my cardigan and my sensible shoes and set off down the familiar streets. Peterson's garden center had been in the same family for 3 generations. Old Mr. Peterson had known Thomas and me since we were young marrieds, buying our first tomato plants. Now his granddaughter, Jenny, ran the place. She was about Luke's age, actually, sweet girl with dirt under her fingernails and a smile that could light up a room. Mrs. Grace, how lovely to see you, she called out as I approached the counter. What can I help you with today? Just some mulch for the roses, dear. The usual, of course. I'll have Danny load it up for you. She paused, studying my face with the kind of attention that comes from genuinely caring about people. You look tired, Mrs. Grace. Are you feeling all right? I forced a smile. Oh, just spring cleaning. You know how it is. Well, make sure you're taking care of yourself. You'll want to be rested for the big day coming up. I looked at her blankly. Big day? The wedding. It's wedding at Rosewood Manor. I've been doing all the flowers for it. Absolutely gorgeous arrangements. White roses, baby's breath, some beautiful peonies. The bride has exquisite taste. Though I have to say, her mother ... Jenny rolled her eyes. Well, let's just say she's very particular about everything being perfect. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Wedding, your grandson's wedding, next Saturday. I'm so excited, it's going to be beautiful. The bride's family spared no expense. Though between you and me, she leaned in conspiratorially, I think. They're a little uptight about the whole thing. The mother kept going on about the guest list, making sure only the right sort of people were invited. She actually saidn't. I probably shouldn't repeat this, but she said something about not wanting any charity case relatives spoiling. The photos, the words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Mrs. Grace, are you all right? You look pale. I'm fine. Just a bit warm. Jenny's face changed, concern creeping in around the edges. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I assumed. I mean, you're his grandmother. Of course you'd be there. I just thought, Mrs. Grace, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. Dear, it's fine. There must be some confusion. But there wasn't confusion. There was only this stark, brutal clarity of understanding. I hadn't been forgotten. I hadn't been excluded because of my age or my arthritis or concern for my comfort. I had been excluded because I was the charity case grandmother who didn't fit their aesthetic. Jenny insisted on having Danny deliver the mulch for free. Her face, still flushed with embarrassment at her mistake. I walked home slowly, my legs feeling unsteady, my mind reeling. Every step felt like I was walking through molasses, every breath like I was drowning. When I reached my front door, I stood there for a moment, key in hand, not sure I wanted to go inside. Inside meant facing the truth. Inside meant being alone with the knowledge that my own family was ashamed of me, but I had nowhere else to go. So I went inside. I made tea Earl Grey, always Earl Grey, and sat in my chair by the window. But this time, I didn't watch the world outside. I stared at my reflection in the glass, studying the face that had apparently become such an embarrassment. Wrinkles. Around my eyes. Yes. Gray hair that I kept in a simple bun. Clothes that were clean, but certainly not fashionable. Hands that showed the wear of 7 decades of living, of working, of caring for others. When had I become someone to be hidden away? The afternoon stretched into evening, and I couldn't bring myself to eat dinner. I just sat there, sipping cold tea and feeling something inside me wither. This was what grief felt like when it came from the living instead of the dead. This was what betrayal felt like when it came wrapped in love and good intentions. I must have fallen asleep in my chair, because I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. Not ringing buzzing, a text message. Who would be texting me at T? Squinted at the clock. 9:30 at night. I'm not very good with technology, but Luke had insisted on getting me a smartphone last Christmas, so we can stay in touch. Grandma, he'd said. I'd protested that I didn't need it, but he'd been so excited to teach me how to use it that I'd agreed. The message was from my neighbor's daughter, Christine. She was about Sarah's age, and she'd been trying to help me understand social media. I'd resisted, but she'd shown me how to see pictures of my grandchildren online. And I'd reluctantly agreed to let her help me set up one of those Facebook accounts. Mrs. Grace, the message read, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I thought you should see this. I was scrolling through Facebook and saw some photos from your grandson's rehearsal dinner. I thought you might want to see them, but then I saw some of the comments and, well, I think you should know. My heart started racing. Rehearsal dinner. That meant the wedding was tomorrow. And I was sitting here in my nightgown, completely forgotten, with shaking fingers. I managed to open the application Christine had shown me. There, at the top of my screen, was a photo of Luke in a handsome suit, standing with Emma in a beautiful dress. They were laughing, surrounded by what looked like 50 or 60 people in an elegant restaurant. I scrolled through the photos slowly, my heart breaking a little more with each one. Luke looked so happy. So did Emma. There were Sarah and her husband looking proud and elegant. There was what must have been Emma's family, well-dressed, confident, beautiful. And there was a comment from a woman named Patricia Worthington. Emma's mother, I realized. The comment was attached to a photo of the entire group, everyone smiling and toasting with champagne glasses. So blessed to be celebrating our darling Emma's last night as a single woman. Tomorrow will be absolutely perfect, just family and our dearest friends. We've worked so hard to make sure every detail is flawless. Thank goodness we didn't have to worry about any awkward family situations. You know how it is, some relatives are just. Well, let's just say that old Charity Kay's grandmother would have been completely out of place. She should be grateful. We even let her survive this long, honestly. Tomorrow will be elegant and refined, exactly as it should be. I read the comment 3 times before the words really sank in. Then I read it again, She should be grateful we even let her survive this long. I set the phone down with trembling hands and walked to the bathroom. In the mirror, I saw an old woman with tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in days, I really looked at myself. I saw a woman who had given 47 years of her life to educating children. A woman who had raised 3 children and helped raise 2 grandchildren. A woman who had volunteered at the food bank every Saturday for 20 years. A woman who had sat by Thomas's bedside every day for 6 months while cancer took him away from me, never once complaining, never once asking for help. I saw a woman who had loved deeply and given freely and asked for very little in return. And I saw a woman who had been called a charity case by people, who had never worked a day in their lives for anyone but themselves. I was angry. For the first time in my life, I was truly, deeply angry. I walked back to the kitchen, my steps steadier now, my breathing deeper. I opened the drawer where I kept important papers, insurance documents, the deed to the house, Thomas's will. And there, in the back, was a small wooden box I hadn't opened since the day after Thomas's funeral. Inside the box was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Thomas's careful handwriting. Below that, a folded document I'd never looked at. My hands were steady now as I opened the envelope. My dearest Evelyn, it read, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope you've had time to grieve properly. I hope you've been taking care of yourself and not just everyone else. It's the way you always do. There's something I need to tell you, something I did without discussing it with you first. I hope you'll forgive me, but I know you would have argued if I'd asked. Last month, I bought a property. It's called Rosewood Manor, and it's a beautiful place about an hour outside of town. I bought it because it was going to be torn down, and I couldn't bear the thought of such a beautiful place being destroyed. But more than that, I bought it because I had a feeling it might be important someday. I put the deed in your name. The property is yours, Evelyn. Set up a trust to cover the taxes and maintenance for the next 20 years. You don't need to worry about anything. I did this because I know you, my love. I know how generous you are, how you put everyone else's needs before your own. I know how our children sometimes take advantage of your kindness without even realizing it. And I wanted to make sure that you always had something that was completely yours. Something that no one could take away from you. Use it however you see fit. Sell it if you want. Donate it if you want. Or just keep it as a reminder that you are valuable, that you matter, that you deserve beautiful things. I love you more than words can say. You are the strongest, most graceful woman I've ever known. Don't let anyone, not even our children, convince you otherwise. All my love." Thomas, I set the letter down and picked up the folded document. It was indeed a deed, dated 6 months before Thomas died. Rosewood Manor. The property was described as a Victorian mansion and surrounding grounds, suitable for events and gatherings. Rosewood Manor, the same name Jenny had mentioned. Venue for Luke's wedding. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the deed, understanding slowly dawning. Thomas had bought the wedding venue. Without knowing it, he had bought the very place where I was being excluded, where I was being called a charity case, where I was being erased from my own grandson's life. I looked at the clock, 10:15. The wedding was tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I had 18 hours to decide what to do. I made more tea Earl Grey. Always Earl Grey, and sat by the window. But this time, I wasn't watching the world outside. I was thinking. I thought about the little boy who used to climb into my lap and beg for just one more story. I thought about teaching him to braid friendship bracelets and helping him with his homework. I thought about the proud smile on his face when he graduated high school, when he got his first job. When he told me about Emma Dot, I thought about the woman who had written that comment, who had called me a charity case, who had said I should be grateful to survive. And I thought about Thomas, who had somehow known that I would need protection, who had quietly and carefully made sure I had something that was mine. I thought about dignity, about worth, about the difference between being humble and being humiliated by mourning. I knew what I had to do. I woke early, as I always do, and made my tea. But today was different. Today, I had a purpose. I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I'd worn to Thomas's funeral. It was navy blue, simple but elegant, with a matching jacket. I'd bought it from the nice department store in the city, not because I needed something fancy, but because I wanted to look worthy of the man I was burying. I styled my hair carefully, the way the girl at the salon had shown me. I put on lipstick, not too much, just enough to bring some color to my face. I looked in the mirror and saw not the charity case grandmother, but Evelyn Grace, widow of Thomas Grace, mother of 3, grandmother of 2, former head librarian and owner of Rosewood Manor. I gathered the deed and a few other important documents, put them in my good purse, and called for a taxi. I hadn't driven much since Thomas died, and I didn't want to risk getting lost on the way to the venue. The drive took exactly an hour and 15 minutes. I spent the time looking out the window at the countryside, at the rolling hills and old farmhouses. It was a beautiful day for a wedding. Clear skies, warm sunshine, a gentle breeze. When we pulled up to Rosewood Manor, I understood why Thomas had wanted to save it. It was indeed beautiful, a grand Victorian mansion surrounded by manicured gardens with a view of the mountains in the distance. There were white chairs set up on the lawn, hundreds of them arranged in perfect rows. White roses everywhere, just as Jenny had said. I paid the taxi driver and walked slowly up the gravel path. There were people bustling around, caterers, probably, and wedding planners. A young woman in a headset approached me. "Excuse me, ma'am, but this is a private event. You looking for someone?" I smiled at her. "Yes, dear. Looking for the wedding coordinator." "That would be me. I'm Jennifer. Is there something I can help you with?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed. "I need to speak with you about the rental agreement for this property." Jennifer looked confused. "The rental agreement. Is there a problem with the payment?" "It's because everything should be, I'm Evelyn Grace," I said clearly, "and I own this property." The color drained from Jennifer's face. "You ... what?" "I own Rosewood Manor, and I'm here to terminate the rental agreement." But that's impossible. The wedding is in 4 hours. We have 300 guests coming. It's the food, the flowers, the music, everything's already set up." I looked around at the beautiful preparations, at the roses and the white chairs and the elegant tables. It was lovely. It would have been a beautiful wedding. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," I said, "but I no longer consent to this event taking place on my property." Jennifer's headset crackled, and I could hear frantic voices on the other end. Word was spreading quickly. Within minutes, a man in an expensive suit was striding across the lawn toward us. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "I'm Robert Worthington, father of the bride. Is there some sort of problem, Mr. Worthington?" I said calmly, "I'm Evelyn Grace. I own this property, and I'm terminating your rental agreement." His face turned red. "That's ridiculous. You can't just show up and I have the deed right here," I said, holding out the document. "And I have the right to revoke permission for this event." "This is insane. Do you have any idea how much money we've spent? How many people are coming? You can't just..." "Actually, I can." More people were gathering now. I could see Sarah hurrying across the lawn, her face pale with shock. Behind her, Luke was running, still in his wedding suit but without his jacket. "Mom." Sarah's voice was shrill with panic. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Sarah," I said. "I'm here because this is my property." "Your property?" "That's impossible. You don't own Thomas bought it 6 months before he died." I said, "It's mine." Luke reached us, breathing hard. "Grandma, what's happening? Why are you here?" I looked at my grandson, at his confused face, at the hurt and bewilderment in his eyes, and for a moment my resolve wavered. This was Luke, my Luke, who used to fall asleep in my lap during story time. "I'm here because I wasn't invited to your wedding," I said quietly. "What? Of course, you were invited. You're my grandmother." "Of course. No, Luke, I wasn't." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening it to the Facebook post from the night before. I'm here because your future mother-in-law called me a charity case and said I should be grateful to survive. I handed him the phone. Read the comment, his face growing paler with each word. Grandma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said, but someone did know. Someone decided I wasn't good enough to be here. Patricia Worthington had arrived now, elegant in a mother-of-the-bride dress that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. She was talking rapidly to her husband, gesturing wildly. She was saying, "We have a contract. We have rights." She can't just... She stopped when she saw me looking at her. "You must be Patricia," I said. "I'm the charity case." Grandmother, her face went white, then red, then white again. I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I read your comment last night about how I should be grateful to survive, about how I would have been out of place at your elegant wedding. I never said you said I was a charity case. You said I didn't belong here." I gestured around at the beautiful setting. "Well, you're right about one thing. I don't belong here because this is my property and I choose who belongs here." The crowd was growing larger now. Guests were beginning to arrive and word was spreading quickly through the group. I could see people taking pictures with their phones, could hear the murmur of confused conversations. "Look," Patricia said, her voice desperate now. "Maybe we can work something out. I'll apologize. I'll pay you whatever you want. Just please, don't ruin my daughter's wedding." "Not ruining anything," I said. "I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner." "But the guests, the food, the flowers, everything's already paid for." I looked around at all the beautiful preparations, at the roses and the elegant tables and the white chairs arranged in perfect rows. I looked at Emma, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd, still in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face. And I looked at Luke, my grandson, who was staring at me with a mixture of heartbreak and understanding. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "But I will not be insulted and excluded and then expected to provide the venue for my own humiliation." Jennifer, the wedding coordinator, was talking rapidly into her headset. "We need to contact all the guests immediately. We need to find an alternative venue." "We need to? There is no alternative venue," Robert Worthington said grimly. "Not for 300 people on 4 hours' notice." The reality of the situation was sinking in. The wedding was canceled. The guests would have to be turned away. The food would go to waste. The flowers would wilt. The beautiful preparations would be dismantled. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like justice instead. It felt like the saddest thing I'd ever done. Luke approached me slowly, his face streaked with tears. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I reached out and touched his face, the way I used to when he was small and had scraped his knee. "I know, sweetheart, I know. I would never have excluded you. Never. You're the most important person in my life. I know that too. Is there any way we can fix this? Can we have the wedding? I'll make them apologize. I'll make them know." "Luke," I took his hands in mine. "Some things can't be fixed with apologies." He was crying openly now. "Love you, Grandma. I've always loved you. You know that, right?" "I know, sweetheart. I love you too." And I did. Standing there in my navy blue dress, surrounded by the wreckage of a wedding that would never happen, I loved him completely and unconditionally. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes dignity matters more. I stayed for about an hour, long enough to watch the vendors pack up their equipment, long enough to see the guests turned away at the gate. Jennifer was remarkably professional about the whole thing, making phone calls and arranging for the food to be donated to a local shelter. Sarah approached me as I was preparing to leave. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "Yes, you do." I didn't. Know what Patricia had said? "I didn't know she felt that way about you, but you knew you were excluding me. You knew you were lying to me about why." Sarah's face crumpled. I was trying to protect you, I thought. I thought you'd be more comfortable at home. I thought the wedding would be too much for you. What you thought was that I'd be an embarrassment. No, no, that's not Sarah. I've been your mother for 42 years. I know when you're lying to me. She started to cry then, the way she used to when she was a little girl and had been caught doing something wrong. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Can you forgive me? I looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised. The woman who had inherited my stubborn streak and Thomas's practical nature. I looked at her expensive dress and her carefully styled hair and her perfectly applied makeup. I can forgive you. I said, but I can't forget. And I can't pretend this didn't happen. I called another taxi and rode home in silence, watching the countryside roll by. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was still a beautiful day, even if it hadn't been a beautiful day for a wedding. When I got home, I made tea Earl Grey, always Earl Grey, and sat in my chair by the window. I was tired, more tired than I'd been in months. But I was also something else. Something I hadn't been in a very long time. I was proud of myself. The phone rang several times that evening, but I didn't answer it. I knew it would be Sarah or maybe Luke or possibly even Patricia Worthington trying to negotiate. But I had said everything I needed to say. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning I was back in my routine. Tea by the window, watching the world wake up. But today felt different. Today I felt like I was seeing everything clearly for the first time in months. At 10 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Luke standing on my porch, still in his wedding suit from the day before, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Grandma, can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He sat heavily on my couch, putting his head in his hands. "I called off the engagement," he said quietly. "Oh, Luke, I'm sorry." "No, you're not. And you shouldn't be." He looked up at me. "Do you know what Emma said to me after you left? She said she was glad you weren't coming to the wedding. She said her mother was right, that you would have been out of place." I sat down beside him. "She's young, sweetheart. Sometimes young people. She's 24 years old, Grandma. She's old enough to know better." He ran his hands through his hair. I realized I was about to marry someone who thought my grandmother was beneath her. I was about to marry into a family that called you a charity case. That doesn't mean you had to call off the wedding. Yes, it does. He looked at me with those same blue eyes he'd had as a child. "You raised me, Grandma. You taught me about kindness and dignity and treating people with respect. How could I marry someone who doesn't have those same values?" I took his hand. "I don't want you to be alone because of me. I'm not alone because of you. I'm alone because I finally saw who Emma really was, and I realized I deserved better." We sat in silence for a while, holding hands the way we used to when he was small and scared. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "We move forward," I said. "We learn from this. We grow from this. We don't let it make us bitter. Are you bitter?" I considered the question. "I don't think I am. I'm sad, I'm disappointed, but I'm not bitter." He said. "I'm furious. I'm furious at Emma, at her family, at Mom for going along with it. I'm furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. That's okay too. You're allowed to be angry." "Are you angry at me?" "No, sweetheart. I'm not angry at you." He started crying again then. And I held him the way I used to when he was 8 years old and his father had disappointed him again. Some things never change. Some hurts never get easier. Luke stayed for lunch, and we talked about everything except the wedding. He told me about his job, about a book he was reading, about his plans to travel to Europe someday. We talked about Thomas and the stories he used to tell. We talked about the garden and the birds and the changing seasons. When he left, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Grandma. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the man you and Grandpa taught me to be." "You already are that man," I said. "You just forgot for a while." After he left, I sat in my chair by the window and thought about what to do with Rosewood Manor. It was a beautiful property, and it seemed wrong to let it sit empty. Thomas had bought it to save it from being torn down, and I wanted to honor that intention. I called my lawyer the next morning and asked him to help me set up a donation. I wanted to give the property to the women's shelter in town, to be used as a retreat center for women who needed a safe place to heal and rebuild their lives. The paperwork took a few weeks to complete, but eventually it was done. Rosewood Manor would become the Thomas Grace Retreat Center, named after the man who had somehow known that I would need protection, who had quietly and carefully made sure I had something that was mine. The local newspaper ran a story about the donation, and I received dozens of letters from people in the community thanking me for my generosity. But I didn't feel generous. I felt like I was finally doing something worthy of the man who had loved me enough to buy me a pet Victorian mansion just in case I needed it. Sarah came to see me a few weeks later. She looked tired and older somehow, as if the events of the wedding had aged her. Mom, I've been thinking about what happened, about what I did. Have you? I was wrong. I was so wrong. I let Patricia Worthington make me ashamed of my own mother, and I'll never forgive myself for that. You don't need to forgive yourself. Need to learn from it. I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately, about what he would have said about all this. What do you think he would have said? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. He would have been ashamed of me. He would have been so disappointed that I chose social status over my own mother. I reached across the table and took her hand. Your father loved you very much. He wouldn't have been ashamed. He would have been hurt, but he would have forgiven you. How can you be so kind to me after what I did? 'Cause you're my daughter. Because I love you. Because that's what mothers do. We talked for a long time that day, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. Sarah told me about the pressure she'd felt from Patricia Worthington, about the subtle comments and suggestions that had made her feel like I wouldn't fit in. She told me about her own insecurities, about wanting to belong to a world that seemed more sophisticated than the one she'd grown up in. I lost myself somewhere along the way, she said. I forgot who I was, who raised me, what really matters. Then remember, I said simply. It's not too late to remember. Sarah started coming to see me more often after that. She'd bring groceries or help with the garden or just sit with me while I read. She was trying to make amends, and I let her. Not because I needed her to, but because she needed to. Luke came by every week, sometimes more. He'd taken a leave of absence from work and was using the time to figure out what he really wanted from life. He was dating someone new, a teacher named Maria who worked with special needs children. She was kind and genuine and thought my stories about Luke as a child were hilarious. She wants to meet you, he told me one afternoon while we were working in the garden together. I'd like that. She knows about what happened at the wedding. She knows about Emma and her family. She can't believe anyone would treat you that way. People treat others the way they've been taught to treat them. Emma's family taught her that some people matter more than others. Maria's family taught her that everyone matters. Then she sounds like a keeper. He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. I think she might be. Spring turned to summer and the garden flourished. The roses Thomas had planted years ago bloomed more beautifully than ever, as if they were celebrating their freedom from the shadow of rejection that had hung over the house for so long. I received a letter one day from Jennifer, the wedding coordinator from Rosewood Manor. She wrote to tell me that the retreat center was already helping dozens of women, that it was becoming a place of healing and hope. She also mentioned that she'd donated her services for free to help set up the programs there. I was so impressed by your dignity that day, she wrote. I've never seen anyone handle such a difficult situation with such grace. You inspired me to think about how I treat people in my own life. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the wooden box where I kept Thomas's letter. These were the kinds of treasures worth keeping, not gold or jewels, but words that reminded me of who I was and who I wanted to be. One evening in late summer, I was sitting by the window with my tea when I noticed someone walking up the front path. It was a young woman I didn't recognize, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mrs. Grace, I'm Emma." I studied her face, this girl who had been about to marry my grandson. She looked different than I remembered. Younger, more uncertain, less polished. Double quotes. "Hello, Emma. I was wondering, could I talk to you, please?" I stepped aside and let her in. She sat nervously on the edge of my couch, still clutching the flowers. "I brought these for you," she said, holding out the bouquet. "It's from your garden at Rosewood Manor. I mean, what used to be your garden. I went there yesterday for the first time since the wedding. That wasn't." I took the flowers, roses, and baby's breath. Simple but beautiful. "Thank you." I wanted to apologize. I know it's too late, and I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. "All right, I was wrong about you. Mother was wrong about you. We were cruel and snobbish, and we treated you terribly." She was crying now, tears running down her cheeks. "I lost Luke because of it. I lost the best man I've ever known because I was too shallow to see past my mother's prejudices. I'm sorry you lost Luke. I'm not. I mean, I am, but I'm not. He deserves better than someone who would exclude his grandmother from his wedding. He deserves someone who shares his values." I sat down across from her. "Why did you come here, Emma?" "Because I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I lost, what my family lost. We lost the chance to know an amazing woman because we were too focused on appearances and social status. And what do you want from me? Nothing. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I understand why you did what you did. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were just standing up for yourself." I looked at this young woman, at her tears and her flowers and her genuine remorse. She was learning, maybe too late, but she was learning. "I accept your apology," I said. "Thank you." She stood up, wiping her eyes. "I should go. I needed to say that, Emma." She turned back at the door. "You're very young. You have time to become the person you want to be. Don't let your mother's values become your values unless you choose them." She nodded, fresh, tears starting. "Thank you, Mrs. Grace, for everything." She left. I put the flowers in water and sat back down by the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a beautiful evening, peaceful and quiet. I thought about the girl who had just left, about the courage it must have taken to come here. I thought about Luke and his new girlfriend, Maria. I thought about Sarah and her efforts to rebuild our relationship. Most of all, thought about Thomas, who had somehow known that I would need protection, who had quietly and carefully made sure I had something that was mine. He'd given me more than a property deed. He had given me the means to stand up for myself, to choose dignity over acceptance, to value myself even when others DN single quotes. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Luke. "Grandma, I have something to tell you." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Asked Maria to marry me." "Oh, Luke, that's wonderful." She said, "Yes, we're thinking about a small ceremony, just family and close friends, maybe in your garden, if you'd be willing." I looked out at the garden Thomas had planted, at the roses blooming in the evening light. "I'd be honored, and Grandma, you'll be in the front row, right where you belong." I smiled, feeling something warm and healing spread through my chest. "I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat in my chair and finished my tea. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet now, a peaceful quiet. Not the silence of loneliness, but the calm of contentment. I had learned something important in these past few months. I had learned that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you claim for yourself. I had learned that love without respect is just sentiment. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable treatment. But most importantly, I had learned that I was valuable just as I was. Not because of my accomplishments or my relationships or my property, but because I was a human being deserving of respect and consideration. 3 months later, I watched my grandson marry Maria in a simple ceremony in my garden. I wore the same navy blue dress I'd worn to confront them at Rosewood Manor. But this time it felt celebratory rather than somber. Sarah sat beside me, holding my hand during the vows. She had been different since that day, more thoughtful, more present. She called me every week now, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to talk to me. Luke and Maria had written their own vows, and they spoke about choosing each other, not just for who they were, but for who they brought out in each other. They talked about building a life based on kindness and integrity and mutual respect. Maria's parents were there, warm, genuine people who had insisted on bringing the food and flowers. They treated me like an honored guest, asking about my garden and my years as a librarian and my memories of Thomas. Luke talks about you all the time, Maria's mother told me. He says you're the strongest woman he knows. He's biased, I said, but I was pleased. Maybe, but I can see why he thinks so. After the ceremony, we all sat in the garden eating cake and talking. The sun was setting and the roses were in full bloom and everything felt exactly as it should. Luke came over to where I was sitting and knelt beside my chair. Thank you, Grandma, for everything, for raising me right, for teaching me about dignity and self-worth, for showing me that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. Welcome, sweetheart. I'm proud to be your grandson. I'm proud to be your grandmother. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, I found myself alone in the garden with a cup of tea Earl Grey. Always Earl Grey, watching the stars come out. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, sitting in this same chair, feeling invisible and forgotten. I thought about the phone call from Sarah, the revelation at the flower shop, the cruel comment on social media. I thought about the choice I'd made to value myself, to demand respect, to refuse to be diminished by others' prejudices. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been comfortable. But it had been necessary. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept unacceptable treatment. Sometimes the most radical act is to believe that you matter. They hadn't forgotten to invite me to the wedding. They had never seen me at all. But I saw myself now clearly, completely. Without apology, I saw a woman who had loved deeply and given freely and asked for little in return. I saw a woman who had raised children and educated minds and volunteered her time and cared for her community. I saw a woman who had been a faithful wife and devoted mother and cherished grandmother. I saw a woman who was worthy of respect, who deserved to be valued, who had every right to take up space in the world. I saw myself, and that was enough. The garden was quiet now, peaceful in the moonlight. The roses Thomas had planted years ago swayed gently in the evening breeze, their perfume sweet and familiar. In the distance, I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway marking time the way it had for 43 years. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The rhythm of a life well lived, of moments treasured, of dignity maintained. I finished my tea and stood up slowly, my joints protesting after a long day. Tomorrow I would wake at 6 and make tea and sit by the window and watch the world wake up around me. It would be a quiet day, a simple day, but it would be mine, and I would face it with my head held high, secure in the knowledge that I had chosen myself, that I had demanded the respect I deserved, that I had refused to be diminished by others' inability to see my worth. I walked inside and locked the door behind me, turning off the lights one by one. In the darkness, I could still smell the roses from the garden, still hear the gentle ticking of the clock, still feel the warmth of a day well spent. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I saw an old woman, yes, with wrinkles around her eyes and gray hair and hands that showed the wear of 7 decades of living. But I also saw dignity. I saw strength. I saw worth. I saw Evelyn Grace, who had taught herself that she mattered, who had learned that respect is not given, but claimed, who had discovered that the most important person who needed to value her was herself. And that was enough. That was everything. I had found my voice. I had claimed my worth. I had chosen dignity over acceptance, self-respect over the approval of others, and in doing so, I had finally truly come home to myself.